You push the heavy wooden door closed behind you, and the latch drops into place with a soft, final click. The last grey light of the late autumn afternoon retreats from the cottage, leaving you in the quiet dark of the small room. It takes a moment for your eyes to find the shapes they know. The wide hearth with its low bed of embers, the oak table pushed against the wall, the three-legged stool, the baskets, the hurdle, the wooden pegs on the beam. A single flame still licks at a half-burned log, throwing unsteady orange light across the stone flags and casting your shadow large and motionless against the far wall. The air is warm and still, holding the smell of beechwood smoke, and underneath it, the faint earthy sweetness of clean rushes scattered on the floor. You stand just inside the door and let the quiet settle around you, a quiet made of small sounds, the tick of cooling stone, the soft collapse of a cinder in the grate, your own slow breathing. On the wooden bench beside the door sits the fleece you brought in from the cart. It is rolled into a loose bundle, tied with a single twist of twine, and it still carries the faint warmth of the sheep, as if the animal had only just risen from it. You lift the bundle with both hands, feeling its surprising weight, a solid, giving weight that presses back against your palms. The wool is compacted a little from being carried and set down, but you can already see the edges of separate locks curling out from the ends of the roll, pale and uneven. You carry the fleece across the room, stepping slowly so as not to disturb the deep peace of the house, and lay it on the wide oak table. The wood is smooth and dark, worn by years of work, and the fleece looks almost white against it, the color of heavy cream or the inner pith of a rush stem. For a little while you simply stand beside the table with your hands resting on the bundle. There is no hurry. The evening stretches out ahead of you like a long, quiet road, and the first task is nothing more than to become acquainted with the fleece, to feel its shape and its state before you begin to open it. You let your gaze travel over the roll, following the lines of the locks that seem to flow in one direction, remembering the living sheep that wore this coat, the roundness of its shoulders, the curve of its flank. The wool has been sheared with care, taken off in one piece, and the outer surface is still slightly wavy from the natural crimp of the fibres. Where the shears passed close, the cut edges are clean and flat, but other parts show the tangled tips that faced the weather, a little darker and coarser. You press one hand gently into the fleece and feel the spring of it, the way the wool pushes back, still full of air and life. When the room has grown fully familiar again, you untie the twine and set it aside on the table, a small coil of hemp that will be used later for some other small purpose. The fleece, released, does not spring apart, but rather relaxes into itself, the layers beginning to separate of their own accord. You lift one edge and begin to unroll it across the table, working slowly so as not to tear the delicate mesh of fibres. The wool comes open with a soft rustle, a sound like dry grass stirring in a light breeze, and the smell that rises from it deepens. It is the smell of the field, of wild chamomile and clover, of clean animal and the faint sweet waxiness of lanolin. That smell fills the space around the table, mixing with the wood smoke, and it seems to make the firelight warmer. With the fleece spread out fully, you step back a little and look at what you have. It lies across the table like a map of some gentle country, its edges ragged and irregular, its surface mapped in tiny ridges and valleys of crimp. You can see the longer staples running down what would have been the sheep's sides, the shorter wool from the belly edge, the slightly coarser fibres along the top of the back. The color is not one white, but many, 1,000 shades of pale, cream and oatmeal, and the faintest hint of rust where the tips caught the sun. In among the locks, scattered like tiny seeds, are flecks of hay, a dried brown leaf, the dark speck of a thistle prickle, small reminders of the world outside. You draw the three-legged stool close to the table and sit down, settling yourself so that your weight is even and your back straight. The fire is on your left side now, its warmth steady on your cheek and arm. You lean forward and place both hands on the open fleece, letting your fingers sink into the wall just a little. The first thing you do is loosen the rolled edges, the places where the bundle was tightest. You work with only your fingertips, taking hold of a small section and pulling it gently apart from its neighbors. The compressed locks separate with a small fibrous sigh, and the wool beneath is brighter, cleaner, untouched by the pressure. You move along the whole length of the roll, loosening, lifting, releasing, each motion so small and careful that it barely disturbs the air. As you work, the fire settles itself lower into the embers with a series of soft, papery sounds. A lodge shifts, and a scatter of sparks rises and dies. The candle on the mantelpiece, a single teller dip in a tin holder, burns with a flame that never quite stills, nodding slightly as the warmed air moves around it. The cottage holds you in its quiet embrace, and time becomes something measured not by hours, but by the slow, steady rhythm of your hands. You take the first real lock of wool between thumb and forefinger and draw it away from the main mass. It comes free easily, a long wavy staple with a soft curl at the tip. You lay it flat on the table to your right, where it will wait for sorting. The next lock is a little shorter, a little more tangled at the end, and you set it beside the first. In this way the fleece begins to become not one thing but many, a collection of individual parts that will each be treated according to their nature. The wool is warm under your fingers, holding the last of the animal's body heat, and it is surprisingly clean. The sheep must have grazed on a sheltered hillside, away from the dusty roads and the muddy ditches. You find only a few burrs, small brown hooks that you pick out carefully and drop into a little wooden bowl kept for such things. The bowl is old, its rim worn smooth, and it has held many seasons of burrs and seeds. Each small piece of chaff that you remove leaves the wool a little purer, a little readier for what comes next. Your fingers, already, are becoming coated with the soft grease of the lanolin, which leaves them feeling supple and smooth. You rub them together every so often, a brief unconscious motion, and the sensation is like the lightest of balms. The light from the fire and the candle together falls across the table in a single golden pool, and outside that pool the corners of the room lie in deep shadow. You are aware of the darkness beyond the small, thick-paned window, a darkness that has now filled the whole valley, and of the silence outside that holds the cottage like a cupped hand. No wind stirs, no rain falls, no animal calls. The world has drawn itself in for the night, and you are alone with the fleece and the fire and the work. You find a patch of wool that is particularly dense, where the locks have felted together just slightly from the warmth and pressure of the roll. This asks for a different touch, not pulling but teasing, using the very ends of your fingers to fluff the fibres apart without breaking them. You spend a long time on this one small patch, moving strand by strand, and the slow, repetitive motion is like the stroking of a cat's fur, a thing that calms the mind by asking nothing but patience. The wool gives way at last, opening into a cloud of separate fibres, and you set it with the others, feeling a quiet sense of completion that is too mild even to be called satisfaction. Now and then, you pause and look into the fire. The flames have reduced to a deep, glowing bed of coals that breathe with a soft, regular pulse, brightening and dimming in a rhythm that seems to match your own. You watch the way the light plays over the table, over the wool, over your hands, which are beginning to look like the hands of someone who has worked wool for many years, the knuckles slightly reddened, the skin soft with lanolin. The silence is not empty but full, a presence as real as the table or the stool. In this silence, the smallest sounds become distinct, the slight creak of the stool when you shift your weight, the whisper of wool against wool, the distant, almost imaginary murmur of the night air at the door. You continue to open the fleece, moving from one section to the next, never rushing. The work has a natural order that you follow without thinking. The longer staples from the center of the fleece you keep together, because these will comb into the smoothest tops. The shorter locks from the edges, some almost downy, you set in a separate place, knowing they are better suited to being carded later for softer yarns. The coarser hairs, the kemp that catches the light with a brittle shine, you pull out whenever you find them and drop them into the scrap basket. All of this is done with the same gentle attention, the same steady pace. Your mind does not wander. It rests on the texture of the wool, the play of light, the simple facts of the task. The pile of loosened locks on your right grows slowly, lock by lock, and the fleece on the left becomes thinner, sparser. You can see the table's dark surface beginning to show through in places, and you smooth the remaining wool flat so that nothing is hidden. A small spider, disturbed by the movement, runs lightly across the table and disappears into a crack between the boards. A tiny dark dot in motion, gone before you can even really see it. You watch the crack for a moment, then return to the wool. Your back begins to feel the slight ache of sitting still for a long time, so you stand, stretch your arms out slowly, and walk the few steps to the hearth. You take a small split log from the pile beside the chimney and lay it carefully on the embers. It catches almost at once, the dry bark curling back, and new flames leap up, bright and lively. You stand there for a little while, warming your hands front and back, watching the fire eat into the wood. The extra light makes the whole room seem to wake slightly, and you can see the details that had been hidden in the dimness, the soot-blackened stones of the chimney breast, the iron hook for the kettle, the small clay pot of salt on the mantelpiece, the bunch of dried herbs hanging from the rafter. When your hands are warm enough, you return to the stool and sit down again, drawing the basket of opened wool closer. Now the work changes slightly. Now that the fleece is fully opened, you begin to go back through the locks you have separated, picking each one up, giving it a little shake to let any last dust fall, and laying it flat again in a new arrangement. This is a kind of preliminary sorting, a preparation for the washing that will come later. You hold each lock up to the candlelight and turn it, looking for anything you might have missed. The light shines through the fibres, revealing their near translucency, the way they glow like fine silk when the flame is behind them. Most are clean and sound, but every so often you find a tiny knot of wool where the tip is felted, and you gently pull it apart, restoring the fibres to their straightness. The work is so fine, so repetitive, that it almost becomes a form of rest. There is no weight to it, no urgency. It is simply something for your hands to do while the night deepens. You think, in a vague and untroubled way, about the journey this wool has taken to reach your table. You imagine the sheep on its hillside, the grass under its feet, the sound of its chewing, the way it moved through the seasons of the year, growing this coat without any knowledge of what it was doing. You think of the shearer who came in the early summer, the quick, careful hands that lifted the fleece away in one piece, the way the sheet must have felt suddenly light and cool. You think of the fleece bundled and brought to the market, the voices of traders, the weight of it on a scale, and then the cart ride home, jolting over rutted lanes, the wool bouncing gently inside its wrapping. All of that movement, all of that life, is now stilled on your table, reduced to this quiet, patient substance under your hands. The candle has burned down a little. You can see the pool of melted tallow growing around the wick. You tilt the holder slightly to pool the liquid wax so it won't spill. A small automatic gesture you have made 1,000 times. The fire is steady again, the new log having settled into the grate, and the room is once more filled with a calm, even light. You pick up the next lock and find a small cluster of seeds at its tip, tiny black seeds, the shape of teardrops, held tightly by the wool. You work them out one by one, and each one makes a tiny tap when you drop it into the wooden bowl. The sound is so faint it is almost not a sound at all, just a tremor in the air that your ears catch, because there is nothing else to hear. Your hands move with a knowledge of their own, a memory that lives in the muscles and not in the thoughts. They know how much pressure to use, when to pull and when to tease, when to set a lock aside and move on. You let them work while you simply sit and breathe, watching the pile of sorted wool grow, the pile of unexamined wool shrink. The proportions shift gradually, and after a time you realize that you have been working for quite a long while without any sense of its passing. The room has not changed, the fire has not changed, the night has not changed, but something small and invisible has shifted, a balance tipping so slowly you didn't notice. Now and then you stop altogether, fold your hands in your lap, and just sit. The stool supports you comfortably, the warmth of the fire wraps around your shoulders, and your thoughts settle like the dust in the rushes, drifting down and coming to rest. The fleece lies before you, half sorted, a landscape of pale peaks and valleys, and you look at it without really looking, your gaze soft and unfocused. In these moments the cottage seems to become the whole world, a small safe sphere of light and warmth and quiet, and everything outside it, the dark village, the cold fields, the distant hills, recede us into a dream that is not yours. You are here, only here, with the wool and the flame and the long, slow breath of the night. After a while you pick up the work again, your fingers finding their rhythm without effort. The lock you hold now is especially fine, long and even, with a crimp so regular it looks like a tiny wave frozen in motion. You turn it this way and that, admiring its quality. Then place it carefully with the other choice staples that will be combed first. The lesser locks go into the other heap, and the very short, fluffy pieces, the seconds, are set aside in a third little pile. This system is simple and old, and it requires no thought, only the quiet application of your eyes and hands. The work is a form of peace, a settling of the mind into the texture of the world. The fire pops once, a small, sharp sound, and you glance at it. A tiny piece of sapwood has burst, sending a single orange spark up into the chimney. You watch it rise and vanish, then return your gaze to the wool. Your hands, coated in lanolin now, have a slight sheen in the firelight, a soft gloss that catches the glow and reflects it back. The smell of the fleece has mellowed, becoming less like the field and more like the cottage itself, as if the wool is already beginning to belong here. That smell will linger in your clothes and hair, a clean, animal sweetness that you will carry with you to bed. The last section of the fleece lies at the far edge of the table, a thin layer of wool you have been working towards. You slide the stool along a little to reach it, the legs scraping softly on the stone. This wool is from the very edge of the fleece, the part that lay against the sheep's legs and belly. It is shorter, softer, and much more crinkled, almost like lamb's wool in its fineness. You handle it with special care, teasing it out until it lies like a light foam on the dark wood. This wool will make the softest yarn, the kind used for things worn close to the skin, and you set it in its own place, separate from the rest. At last, there are no more unopened parts of the fleece. The table is covered in small fluffy heaps of wool, arranged in a rough order, and the original bundle is gone entirely, transformed into this collection of separate pieces. You sit back and look at the work you have done, not with pride, but with a simple acknowledgement of completion. The first stage of the process is finished. The fleece has been received, opened, loosened, and given its first rough sorting. It rests now, waiting for the next step, which will be its first washing. You stand up slowly, feeling the ease of your limbs after the long sitting, and pick up the wooden bowl of burrs and seeds. You carry it to the hearth and tip the contents into the fire, where they flare for a moment, a brief dance of tiny sparks, and then are gone. You set the bowl back on the mantelpiece and stand for a moment, looking into the flames, which have settled into a deep, quiet glow. The night outside is full and dark and silent. Inside, the cottage holds its warmth close, and the air is thick with the mingled scents of wool and wood smoke and the faint, clean tang of cooling stone. You turn back to the table and cover the sorted fleece with a clean linen cloth, tucking the edges down loosely so that no dust will settle on it overnight. The wool disappears under the pale fabric, a hidden promise of the work to come. You blow out the candle with a small cupped breath, and the room falls into the softer light of the fire alone, all shadows and ember glow. You stand there for a long moment, letting the quiet fill you completely, before you finally move to bank the fire for the night and take yourself to rest, knowing that the wool will be there in the morning, just as you left it, patient and unchanged. The morning light comes through the small window in a single pale beam, grey and soft, the colour of unwashed fleece itself. You wake to the sound of the fire settling in the grate, a low tick and shift of cooling ash, and for a moment you lie still under the woolen blanket, listening. The cottage is cold, but not sharply so, the kind of cold that gathers in the corners and waits for the first movement of the day. You rise slowly, drawing the blanket aside, and your bare feet meet the rough, cool stones of the floor. The rushes crackle faintly under your weight. You go first to the hearth, where a few embers still show a dull orange heart beneath the grey, and you kneel to coax them back to life with a handful of dry kindling and your own steady breath. A small flame catches, yellow and timid, and you feed it with twigs until it grows confident enough to take a split log. The fire rekindles, and warmth begins to creep back into the room, touching the table, the stool, the covered fleece. You lift the linen cloth from the wool and fold it, setting it aside on the bench. Underneath, the fleece is just as you left it, a landscape of pale locks spread across the dark wood, waiting. The smell of lanolin and meadow has faded a little overnight, but it rises again when you disturb the wall, faint and clean. You run your hand lightly over the separated pieces, feeling the cool, airy texture of fibres that have rested and relaxed. Everything is in order, the long staples in their own group, the shorter pieces nearby, the coarse kemp already removed. The work of the previous evening has prepared the ground, and now the day's task stands clearly before you, a second finer sorting, this time by true candlelight, with a careful eye for every small thing that does not belong. You take a fresh tallow candle from the small supply on the mantelpiece, a stubby cylinder with a twisted flax wick, and set it on the tin plate. The plate is dented from long use, its rim uneven, but it catches the wax well. You place the plate on the table near the center of the fleece, close to your working hand, and light the wick from the fire with a long splinter of kindling. The flame catches at once and settles into a small, steady teardrop of light. It barely flickers, because the air in the room is so still. The only movement comes from your own breathing, and even that is so shallow and slow that the flame merely nods once or twice and then holds still. The candle's light casts a small dome of yellow glow across the table, illuminating a circle no wider than your two hands spread. Beyond that circle, the room remains in the softer, redder light of the fire, and the two lights, candle and flame, meet at the edges without conflict, blending into a single warm atmosphere. You draw the stool close to the table and sit down, settling yourself so that the light falls directly on the wool before you. The fire is at your back now, its warmth a steady pressure between your shoulders. You reach for the first lock of wool and lift it gently between thumb and forefinger, bringing it into the candlelight. The flame shines through the fibres, and for a moment the lock looks like a thin slice of honeycomb, translucent and golden, the individual strands blowing as if lit from within. You turn it slowly, examining every part. Your eyes move along the length of the staple from the cut end, which is clean and blunt, to the tip, which tapers and curls just slightly. Along the shaft of the fibres you look for specks of chaff, tiny dark seeds, the pale husks of grass, anything that might have survived the first rough sorting. Most of the lock is clean, the wool a clear cream with the faintest warmth of ivory, but near the tip you find a single small burr, a brown hooked thing, no larger than a grain of barley. You pick it out with your thumbnail and drop it into the wooden bowl, which you have moved to the table's edge. The burr makes a tiny click as it lands, a sound so small it is almost swallowed by the fire's soft hum. You set the cleaned lock down on the table to your right, beginning a new pile, the pile of once examined, fully sorted wool. This pile will grow throughout the morning, and you will know each piece in it, having held it to the light and found it good. You reach for the next lock and repeat the motion. Lift, bring to the candle, turn, examine, pick away any impurity, place down. The rhythm is slow and steady, your hands moving in a quiet partnership with your eyes. There is no hurry in the work, no sense of needing to be finished by any particular hour. The morning stretches ahead, a calm, open space of time, and you fill it with this simple, repetitive task, letting each lock receive its moment of attention. The candle burns with a small, soft sound, a faint whisper that you can hear only when you lean close. The tallow melts slowly, pooling around the wick in a clear, hot liquid that smells faintly of fat and smoke. From time to time you pause to trim the wick, pinching away the charred tip with your fingers, a quick, practiced motion that keeps the flame steady and smoke-free. Each time you do this, the flame dips and then recovers, brighter for a moment before settling back into its calm, golden shape. You notice the way the melted wax forms a tiny moat around the base of the wick, and the way the light reflects off the shiny surface, a miniature mirror of fire. The locks vary in size and quality, and this variety gives the work a gentle interest without ever becoming exciting. Some locks are long and fine, almost silky, and they require only a quick glance before you place them in the combing pile. Others are shorter and more tangled, and these you must hold closer to the flame, peering into the crimped depths where dirt can hide. You find in one lock a tiny dried clover flower, its pink color faded to a dusty brown, still clinging to a fragment of stem. You draw it out carefully, admiring its delicate shape, the way the petals have closed and hardened, before setting it aside. In another lock you discover a single strand of dark wool, a stray fibre from a different sheep entirely, perhaps picked up in the pasture or during shearing. You pull it free and discard it, keeping the fleece pure. These small discoveries are the only events of the morning, and each one is met with the same calm, unhurried attention. Your fingers, as they work, learn the feel of the wool in a deeper way. The lanolin from the night before has left a slight residue on your skin, and now as you handle the dry wool, your fingertips become coated again with the faintest trace of grease, enough to make them glide smoothly over the fibres without snagging. The wool feels warm and alive, not in any animate sense, but in the springiness of its texture, the way it resists and then yields to pressure. You find yourself stroking each lock unconsciously before you examine it, a gesture that smooths the cut ends and aligns the fibres just a little, making them easier to see. This stroking motion becomes part of the rhythm. Smooth, lift, examine, place, repeat. Examine, place, repeat. The quiet of the room absorbs the tiny sounds of your work, the soft whisper of wool against wool, the light tap of a seed hitting the bowl, the creak of the stool when you shift your weight. Outside, the day remains grey and still. No wind stirs the thatch, no birds call. The world beyond the window might be made of felted cloud, thick and muffled and silent. The cottage feels like a small boat floating on a calm sea of quiet, and you are the only occupant, suspended in the warm, golden sphere of candlelight. The fire hums behind you. It sounds so low and constant that it becomes a part of the silence itself. You breathe slowly, in time with your work, and your mind rests on the task as lightly as a leaf on still water. There is no wandering thought, no memory, no plan for the future. There is only this lock and the next lock, and the candle burning between them. The pile of sorted wool on your right grows taller and softer, a mound of fluffy locks that seem to hold the light within themselves. The pile of unsorted wool on your left shrinks at the same steady pace, and you move the candle plate along the table to follow your progress, keeping the light centered on the active work. The tin plate makes a small, dull sound when you slide it across the wood, a sound that seems very loud for a moment, and then vanishes into the general hush. You notice as the morning progresses that the quality of the wool is improving. You have moved from the edges of the fleece, where the shorter and dustier locks lay, into the heart of it, where the staples are long and even and almost white. These choice pieces require almost no cleaning, but you still hold each one to the candle, out of thoroughness, and because the routine is so deeply settled into your hands that to skip any step would feel like a breaking of the quiet spell. The candle burns down by slow degrees. You watch the wax level drop with a calm, detached interest, noting the way the flame sinks closer to the plate, the way the light changes slightly as the distance between wick and reflector shifts. When the candle is burned down to a stub that threatens to gutter, you light a fresh one from its dying flame and set the old aside to cool. The new candle takes up the task seamlessly, its flame a little brighter for being taller, and you continue without pause. The transition is so smooth that it feels like no break at all, just a brief warm moment of flame touching flame, a passing of light from one generation to the next. With the heart of the fleece now mostly sorted, you turn your attention to the smaller pile of shorter wool, the pieces you had set aside the night before for other uses. These locks are softer and more crinkled, some of them almost downy, and they tend to catch the light differently, scattering it rather than transmitting it. They also hold more debris, because their fine, crimped texture is a natural trap for seeds and dust. You take them one by one, bringing them very close to the candle flame, so close that you can feel the slight warmth of it on your cheek, and you pick them over with particular care. A few locks are matted beyond easy use. These you pull apart patiently, fibre by fibre, until they open into a soft, airy mass that can be set with the rest. The matted ones take longer, but this does not trouble you. Time is not a thing to be spent or saved. It is simply the medium in which the work takes place, like the air you breathe. The bowl of debris fills slowly. You empty it once into the fire, watching the tiny bits of chaff and burr flare and vanish, and then set it back on the table to begin again. The act of emptying the bowl is a small marker of progress, a gentle punctuation in the long sentence of the morning. The fire accepts the offerings without comment, flaring briefly and then settling, its flames licking the new log you laid on it a little while ago. You pause now and then to tend the fire, pushing the logs together with the iron poker, and these pauses are as much a part of the work as the sorting itself. They give your eyes a rest from the close focus, allowing them to wander over the larger shapes of the room, the dark beams overhead, the iron pot hanging from its hook, the worn flagstones, the narrow door. Each thing is in its place, and the order of the cottage is a quiet comfort. When you sit down again after a pause, the stool feels familiar and welcoming, the groove of its seat matching the shape of your body. You pick up the next lock, and notice, in the candlelight, a faint shimmer along the fibres, a kind of pearly luster that speaks of good health and good pasture. You hold it up a little longer, just looking, before placing it with the combing pile. The wool seems to glow to hold the light inside itself and give it back softened and warm. It is easy to understand in this slow, quiet space why people have always loved wool, why they have gone to so much trouble to clean and comb and spin it. The material itself is a kind of peace, a substance that wants to be ordered and made useful. As the morning wears on towards midday, the light through the window grows a little brighter, the grey softening into a pale, watery silver. The candle, which was once necessary to see the fine details, now seems more like a companion than a tool, its flame a small bright presence in the room. You keep it burning anyway, because the ritual of it has become part of the calm, the act of working within its small circle of light. The fire hums on, and you continue to lift, examine, and place, the rhythm so steady that it might have been going on forever and might continue forever without change. The last few locks of the shorter wool pass through your fingers, and then you reach the final piece, a small fluffy tuft from the very edge of the fleece, the softest of all. You hold it to the candle, find nothing but clean, crinkled wool, and place it gently on the sorted pile. The table is now divided neatly into two main heaps, the long, even staples for combing, and the shorter, softer pieces for other work. The sorting is complete. You sit back on the stool and rest your hands on your thighs, feeling the slight stiffness in your fingers from the prolonged, delicate work. The candle flame, now burning on its second stub, wavers once and then steadies. You look at the piles of wool, the one tall and proud, the other more modest, and you feel a quiet sense of order, an alignment between what was and what is now. The fleece, which arrived as a rough and tangled whole, has been brought through 2 stages of sorting, each finer than the last, and it is now ready for the next step, the washing. But that is for later. For now, you simply sit and let the morning settle around you, the fire warm on your back, the candle burning beside the tidy heaps, the cottage silent and still. The quiet conversation between your eyes and your fingertips has come to a natural pause, and the day holds its breath, waiting with you. The sorted wool rests on the table in 2 soft heaps, one tall and pale, with the long, even staples meant for combing, the other smaller and more crinkled for later use. You turn from the table and go to the wide oak tub that stands against the wall near the hearth, a vessel so old and sturdy that it seems to have grown from the stone floor like a dark, patient mushroom. The tub is made of thick staves bound with iron hoops, its wood blackened by years of soaking and drying, its rim worn smooth by the passage of countless hands. It stands nearly waist high and is wide enough to hold a large basket of fleece with room for water to move freely around it. You lift the heavy wooden lid and set it against the wall, releasing the faint, clean smell of wet oak, a scent that has no sharpness, only a deep, earthy coolness. The tub is empty and dry inside, its bottom scattered with a few tiny curls of wood from long ago. You go to the hearth where the fire has been burning steadily all morning, and take hold of the iron kettle that hangs from its hook. The kettle is heavy with water you filled it with earlier, and the handle is warm even through the folded rag you used to grip it. You lift it carefully, tilting the spout toward the tub, and pour. The water comes out in a thick, steaming column, hitting the wood with a deep, resonant sound that fills the room for a moment and then fades. Steam rises in a soft cloud, curling around your arms and up toward the dark beams. You pour until the kettle is empty, then hang it back and swing the arm over the fire so that a fresh pot of water can begin heating. The tub is now perhaps a third full, the water clear and trembling slightly from the impact, its surface reflecting the orange glow of the flames in a wavering sheet of light. You test the water with your fingers, dipping them just past the first knuckle. It is very warm, almost hot, but not so hot that it would shock the wool. The temperature is important. You know without thinking that wool must be treated gently, never scalded, never agitated in extremes. The warmth should be just enough to loosen the natural grease and coax the dust from the fibres, a comfort to the wool rather than an assault. You find the water a little too hot, and let it stand while you prepare the fleece, giving it time to cool to the right degree, which you judge by feeling, by the way the water welcomes your hand without any sting. You return to the table and gather the first basket of sorted wool. The basket is a wide, shallow thing of woven willow, the same you used the night before to hold the finished tops, now empty and waiting. You fill it with the long staples, taking care to lift them gently so as not to mat the locks together. The wool fills the basket lightly, piling up above the rim in a soft, airy mound, and you carry it across the room with both hands, walking slowly so that no piece drifts to the floor. When you reach the tub, you set the basket on the wide rim and pause, looking down at the water. Its surface has stilled now, a placid mirror of warm brown-grey from the oak, with a faint silky sheen where the light from the window touches it. The steam has thinned to a gentle haze, and the water smells of clean iron and wood. You push up your sleeves, feeling the cool air on your forearms, and then you lift the basket and tip it slowly over the tub. The first lock of wool separates from the mass and falls, spreading as it goes, and lands on the water like a small, pale bird. It floats there for a moment, buoyed by the air caught in its crimp, and then it begins to absorb the water, darkening from cream to a deeper ivory. You continue to tip the basket, letting the wool slide in gently, lock by lock, until the entire basketful rests on the surface of the water, a loose, soft island of fleece. The wool does not sink immediately. It drifts, light and full of air, and the water laps against its edges with tiny, silent motions. Now you set the empty basket on the floor and lean over the tub, placing both hands flat on the floating wool. You press down very slowly, very evenly, feeling the water rise between your fingers and the wool resist just slightly before yielding. The warmth of the water seeps through the fibres, climbing the staples, penetrating into every crimp and fold. You press deeper, and the wool sinks with a quiet sucking sound, the air escaping in a multitude of tiny bubbles that race to the surface and pop. The sound is a soft, effervescent whisper, a living sound that seems to come from the wool itself. You press until the whole mass is fully submerged, your hands now deep in the warm water, the wool pressing back against your palms with a gentle, spongy resistance. The water closes over the last pale tips, and the surface becomes smooth again, faintly dimpled, the wool hidden beneath. You hold the wool under for a long moment, not forcing it, simply keeping it beneath the surface so that every fibre can drink its fill. The warmth of the water travels up your arms, a soothing sensation that loosens the small tensions in your wrists and elbows. You feel the wool begin to settle, the fibres relaxing as the water works its way into the tightest places. After a while you lift your hands out slowly, letting the water drip from your fingers back into the tub, each drop making a soft, distinct plink as it meets the surface. The wool stays submerged, heavy now with water, a dark shape under the grey-brown gleam. You wipe your hands on a cloth hanging from the side of the tub, a piece of old linen kept there for this purpose, and then you step back. The work is now one of waiting. The wool must steep, not boiling, not moving, just resting in the warmth, so that the dirt and the soluble part of the lanolin can loosen and release. You pull the stool over near the tub so that you can sit and watch, and you lower yourself onto it, your back to the fire, your face toward the quiet water. The room settles around you into a new kind of stillness, one that holds the presence of the soaking wool at its center. The surface of the water is not entirely still. Tiny tremors pass across it, born from the settling of the wool below, and from time to time a small silver bubble rises from the depths, pushes through the surface with the faintest pop, and vanishes. The bubbles are no larger than a lentil, and they rise singly or in pairs, each one a tiny messenger of air leaving the fleece. You watch them without counting, your gaze soft and unfocused, your mind as calm and open as the water itself. The light from the fire dances on the surface, weaving orange lines that break and reform, and the reflection of the window appears as a pale grey rectangle floating in the middle of the tub. The whole room seems to be mirrored there, a dim, wavering duplicate of the cottage in miniature. The soft plink of water dripping from somewhere, perhaps from your elbow, where a stray drop still clings, or from the rim of the tub where a little water has splashed, marks the passing of time more clearly than any clock. That small, periodic sound becomes a kind of heartbeat for the room, a quiet metronome that measures nothing urgent. You listen to it as you sit, letting your breathing slow to match its irregular rhythm. The logs in the fire behind you shift with a gentle groan, sending a brief flare of light across the walls, and then settle again. The fire hums its low, constant note, a sound so deep it is felt as much as heard. After a while, you rise and go to the hearth to check the second kettle of water, which has begun to steam gently. You lift it from the hook and pour a careful stream into the tub, not directly onto the wall but to one side, so that the fresh warmth spreads evenly through the water without disturbing the fleece too much. The temperature of the tub rises just a little, enough to keep the steeping active, and you see the water cloud slightly as the first hints of dirt and dissolved lanolin begin to diffuse into it. The cloudiness is very faint, a milky haze that swirls and then blends, and it carries with it the smell of the field, a green, dusty, slightly sweet odor that rises on the steam. You inhale that smell without thinking, and it is like breathing in a memory of summer grass. You return to the stool and sit again, folding your hands in your lap. The waiting is not empty, it is full of small, quiet observations. You notice the way the wool has shifted slightly under the water, the darker shapes of the locks now lying in a slightly different arrangement, as if they are finding their own most comfortable positions. You notice the way the steam rises in thin, curling ribbons that twist and dissolve in the air. You notice the crack in one of the tub's staves, a dark line that has been there as long as you can remember and has never leaked. All these things are simply present, asking nothing of you, and you let them fill the quiet space. The time passes without measure, as it always does when there is nothing to mark it but the slow cooling of water and the soft plink of drops. You do not know how long you have been sitting when you finally rise again and approach the tub. You lean over and look down into the water. The wool below is a shadowy mass, its color deepened to a wet, golden tan, and the water itself has taken on a faintly murky tint, a sign that the steeping is working. You reach in with one hand, very slowly, and touch the fleece. It feels heavy and warm and utterly relaxed, the fibres sliding against each other with no resistance at all. The dirt that was trapped in the crimp has loosened. You can feel it as a faint grittiness when you rub a few fibres gently between your fingers, a fine silty dust that rinses away with the water. The lanolin has softened too, giving the wool a slightly slick feel, a smoothness that was not there before. You lift a single lock out of the water and hold it up to the light. It hangs from your fingers, straight and dark and dripping, the water running down in a thin stream. The lock is heavy and elongated, the crimp pulled out by the weight of the water, but you can see that it is clean, or nearly so. The visible specks of chaff have floated free, and the fibres gleam with a wet, pearly sheen. You lower the lock back into the tub and watch it sink slowly, drifting down to rejoin the rest. The wool is ready for washing, but not quite yet. It needs a little longer, a little more time to simply rest in the warmth and let go of the last stubborn particles. You take up the wooden paddle that leans against the wall beside the tub, a flat, smooth piece of beechwood shaped like a small oar, and you slide it gently into the water. With slow, careful movements, you stir the wool just barely, not agitating it, only shifting it, so that fresh water can find its way into every part of the fleece. The paddle moves as if through thick silk, the water resisting just enough to make the motion feel smooth and deliberate. You see more tiny bubbles rise, and the cloudiness in the water increase slightly, a pale bloom of loosened dirt. The smell of wet wool grows richer, filling the room with its clean, animal warmth. You withdraw the paddle and lay it across the rim of the tub, letting the water drain from it in a thin sheet. Then you return to the stool and the waiting. The fire has burned low. You tend it, placing a fresh log on the embers and watching it catch, the flames licking up around the bark in bright, quick tongues. The room brightens, and the shadows dance, and then everything settles again. The plink of water continues, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, a sound that has become so familiar it is almost a part of the silence. You sit and let the warmth of the fire wrap around you, the heat from the tub a secondary, moister warmth against your face. Your hands rest quietly in your lap, still slightly damp, and you feel the small, pleasant ache in your lower back from leaning over the tub, a reminder of the body's gentle limits. There is no thought in your mind except the simple awareness of the moment, the water, the wool, the fire, the breathing of the house. The steeping continues, a slow, invisible process, and you are its quiet attendant, doing nothing, needing nothing, just present. After another unmeasured stretch of time, you check the wool again. This time, when you lift a lock and hold it to the light, the water that runs from it is almost clear, only the faintest tinge of pale brown. The fibres feel soft and slippery, completely saturated, and when you gently squeeze the lock, no dark dust emerges, only clean water. The steeping has done its work. The fleece has given up the field, releasing its grip on the dust of summer and the tiny seeds of autumn. It is ready now for the careful washing, the gentle removal of the remaining lanolin, and the final traces of soil. But that is a task for the next part of the day, and for now, you simply let the wool rest in its bath, warm and heavy and patient, while you sit beside it in the firelight, listening to the soft plink of water and the slow, steady hum of the fire. The wool has rested long enough in its warm bath, and the water around it has grown clouded with the fine dust and dissolved grease of the field. You rise from the stool and cross to the tub, your footsteps quiet on the stone flags, and peer down into the murky liquid. The fleece is a dark, shadowy shape beneath the surface, still and heavy, fully saturated. Tiny motes of dirt drift in the water, suspended in the slow currents, and the surface has a faint grey film that shimmers with an oily iridescence when the firelight catches it. This first water has done its work, loosening and carrying away the loose soil, and now it must be drained so that the real washing can begin. You take up the wooden bowl that you use for bailing, a deep, smooth scoop, carved from a single block of alder, its handle worn to fit your grip. You lower it carefully into the tub near the edge, tilting it so that the water flows in rather than splashing down onto the wall. The bowl fills with a soft gurgle, and you lift it out, heavy and warm, and carry it to the door. You push the door open with your shoulder and step out into the grey afternoon, where the air is cool and damp and smells of wet earth. A patch of bare ground beside the threshold receives the dirty water, which sinks in quickly with a soft hiss, leaving only a dark stain on the soil. You pour, return, dip again, carry again, establishing a slow, steady circuit that empties the tub by degrees. Each trip is the same, the cool shock of the outside air, the weight of the bowl pulling at your arms, the glug of water hitting the ground, the return to the warm, firelit room. The rhythm is easy and unhurried, and after perhaps 12 or 15 trips the water level has fallen so low that the wool begins to emerge, a wet, dark mound in the bottom of the tub. You set the bowl aside and lean over, pressing your palms gently on the fleece to squeeze out the last of the dirty water. The wool yields under your hands, releasing a thin stream that trickles toward the drain you have left, and you gather the water with the bowl and carry it out until the tub is empty of everything but the damp, compressed fleece. The wool lies in a loose, wet cake, its color now a deep, rich cream, like clotted milk, and it gives off a clean, warm smell. The field scent faded to something softer and more domestic. You leave it there for a moment and go to the hearth to tend the fire, which has burned low during your work. You place 2 fresh lobs on the embers and watch the flames take hold, then swing the kettle arm over the heat so that fresh water can warm. The kettle is heavy. You had filled it from the bucket earlier, and now it hangs over the growing fire, its iron side dark and sweating. While it heats, you fetch a clean basin from the shelf, a wide, shallow earthenware dish glazed on the inside with a pale brown slip, and set it on the table. From the small lidded crock on the mantelpiece, you take a piece of soap. The soap is a hard greyish cake, made in the old way from beechwood ash and mutton tallow, and it has a faint, clean scent, not perfumed, only the honest smell of fat and alkali. You crumble a corner of it between your fingers, letting the fine, sandy particles fall into the basin. The soap is dry and crumbles easily, releasing a fine white dust that catches the firelight. You crumble enough to make a small soft heap in the bottom of the basin, and then you set the remaining soap back in its crock and replace the lid. The kettle begins to sing, a low humming note that rises slowly, and you lift it from the hook with the folded rag, pouring the steaming water into the basin. The water hits the crumbled soap and swirls it into a thin, milky cloud, and a faint froth appears at the edges, tiny bubbles that wink and pop. You stir the water gently with your fingers to dissolve the soap completely, feeling the soft, slippery texture of the solution. And the basin now holds a warm, silvery grey liquid that smells of wood smoke and clean fat. You carry the basin to the tub and set it on the rim, then pause, looking at the wool waiting below. Now you lift the fleece, or rather you gather it up in both arms, the whole wet mass coming away from the tub with a soft sucking sound. It is astonishingly heavy, waterlogged and dense, and you carry it carefully to the basin, lowering it into the warm, soapy water. The wall sinks with a grateful sigh, and the water rises, lapping at the earthenware sides. You push the fleece down gently until it is fully submerged, and then you let it rest, allowing the soap to find its way into every crimp and hollow. The room fills with the mild alkaline scent of the soap, which mingles with the ever-present beechwood smoke and the earthy dampness of the wool. You draw the stool close to the table and sit down, facing the basin. The fire is at your back, warming your shoulders, and the light from the window has dimmed further as the afternoon deepens into late day. A single candle, still burning from the morning's work, stands on the table beside the basin, and its flame reflects in the water as a small, steady star. You look down at your hands, which are reddened from the warm water and coated with the faint slickness of dissolved lanolin, and then you reach into the basin and begin to wash the wool. The washing is not a scrubbing or a rubbing. It is a slow, rhythmic pressing and releasing, a motion so gentle that the locks of wool barely change their shape. You take a section of the fleece between both hands and press it together, feeling the warm, soapy water squish through the fibres and run between your fingers. Then you release, allowing the wool to spring back, and the water rushes in to fill the empty spaces. Press and release, press and release, the rhythm as steady as breathing. Each press forces the soapy water deep into the staples, loosening the remaining lanolin, and each release draws fresh water in, carrying the dissolved grease away. You work your way across the fleece in small sections, lifting one lock, pressing it, releasing it, moving to the next. The wool under your hands feels soft and alive, the fibres sliding against each other with a silky ease that was not there before the soap. The lanolin, which had clung to the wool even after the steeping, now surrenders to the alkali, breaking down into a fine emulsion that clouds the water with a thin white milkiness. You see this milkiness spreading through the basin, and you smell the faint, sweet scent of the fleece's natural oil, now released and mingling with the soap. There is no hurry in the work. You press and release each lock, perhaps 10 times, perhaps 12, feeling the texture change from slightly slick to clean and soft. The sound of the washing is a wet hush, a whispering squelch that is as constant and soothing as the sound of waves on a distant shore. It is a sound that has been made by human hands for thousands of years, wherever wool has been washed in a basin by firelight. Your mind rests on that sound, letting it fill the spaces between thoughts, and the rhythm of your hands becomes automatic, a gentle, repeated motion that requires no attention. Outside, a small wind has risen, stirring the thatch with a low, rustling murmur. The sound is faint, barely audible over the hush of the washing, but you are aware of it as a presence at the edge of the quiet, a reminder that the world beyond the cottage is still there, dark and cool and moving. The wind presses against the door, testing it, and then falls away, leaving an even deeper silence in its wake. Inside, the fire pops once, sending a tiny shower of sparks up the chimney, and the candle flame wavers and recovers. You continue to wash, your hands moving through the water with the slow, patient regularity of a pendulum. The water in the basin grows gradually cooler and cloudier. You pause to dip your fingers into it and feel that it has lost its warmth. So you lift the wool out and set it on a clean cloth spread on the table, a temporary resting place. The fleece drips onto the cloth, a slow rhythmic pattering, and you carry the basin to the door to empty it outside, pouring the soapy water onto the same bare patch of earth which is now dark and soft with moisture. Then you return to the hearth where the kettle has been heating again, and you pour a fresh basin of warm water, this time without soap, for rinsing. You set the basin back on the table and lift the fleece, which is lighter now that some of the water has drained away, and lower it into the clean, warm rinse. The wool welcomes the clear water, and you repeat the same pressing and releasing motion, now to draw out the last traces of soap and loosened lanolin. The water remains mostly clear, with only the faintest hint of cloudiness, a sign that the fleece is nearly clean. You work through the locks again, feeling them grow softer and fluffier under your hands, the fibres beginning to regain their natural spring as the soap is rinsed away. After the rinse, you lift the fleece a final time and carry it, dripping, back to the tub, which you have wiped clean with a rag. You lay the wool in the tub, spreading it out loosely so that it can drain while you clean the basin and the table. You take the basin to the door one more time, empty the rinse water, and wipe the earthenware dry with a cloth. The table, too, you wipe down, removing the dampness and the stray flecks of wool. Everything is put back in its place, the basin on the shelf, the rag hung on its hook, the bale bowl beside the tub. The fire has settled into a deep, steady glow, the logs reduced to bright coals that pulse with a soft orange light. You add one more small log, a slender piece of birch that catches quickly, and the flames leap up, filling the room with a fresh wave of warmth. You pull the stool near the hearth and sit for a moment, letting the heat dry your hands, which are wrinkled from the long immersion, and feel very clean, the skin soft and slightly tight. The smell of the cottage is now a blend of clean wet wool, wood smoke, and the faint, fading trace of the soap. A clean and peaceful scent. You look at the wool resting in the tub. It lies in a pale, loose mound, each lock separate and distinct, its color a soft, creamy white with the barest hint of gold. The washing has transformed it. It is lighter, airier, no longer heavy with dirt and grease, and it seems almost to glow in the firelight. You reach out and touch it, and the fibres are cool now but still slightly damp, and they feel soft and clean and full of potential. The washing is complete, and the wool is ready for the next stage, which will be the spreading on the hurdle to dry. That is a task for later, when the wool is drained a little more. For now, you simply sit, listening to the wind that has risen again outside. A low, soft sound wraps around the cottage like a blanket, and you let the quiet of the evening settle over you, as gentle and thorough as the washing of the wool. The wool has rested in the empty tub long enough for the heaviest of the water to drain away, collecting in a shallow, clear pool at the bottom that you will bail out later. You go to the corner of the cottage where the wattle hurdle leans against the wall, a light, portable screen made of woven willow branches, the withes split and interwoven into a lattice of diamond-shaped gaps. It is roughly the size of a small door, and its surface is smoothed from years of use, the willow polished to a pale silvery sheen by the repeated touch of wet wool. You lift it easily with both hands, feeling the slight flex of the frame as you carry it across the room, and you set it down across two low stools that you have placed not far from the hearth. The hurdle bridges the gap between the stools like a small airy table, its woven surface suspended a comfortable arm's length above the floor. Beneath it, you slide a shallow pan made of tinned iron to catch the drips. its surface slightly dimpled from past encounters with water. Now you return to the tub and look down at the fleece. It lies in a soft, wet mound, each lock separate and glistening, the fibres holding so much water that they appear darker than their true color. A deep, warm cream with the faintest blush of gold where the firelight touches them. You lean over and gather up the first section of wool, lifting it in both hands. The water streams from it in a dozen thin rivulets, pattering down into the tub with a sound like soft rain. The fleece is heavy but not unmanageable, and you carry it the few steps to the hurdle, holding it carefully so that it does not drag or pull apart. You lay the first lock on the woven willow, spreading it out flat with slow, deliberate movements of your fingertips. The wool comes to rest on the lattice like a small, pale cloud, the water beading on the surface of the fibres and then sinking through the gaps into the pan below with a faint, metallic plink. You tease the lock apart just a little, opening it so that the air can find its way between the staples, and then you smooth it down with your palm, pressing very lightly, just enough to express a little more water. The wool flattens under your hand and then slowly rises again as the fibres remember their natural spring. The firelight shines through the wet strands and makes them glisten as if they were touched by a light frost, every tiny crimp catching the glow. You return to the tub for another lock, and then another, carrying each one to the hurdle and laying it down beside its neighbours. The work is slow and steady, a quiet procession across the room, tub to hurdle, hurdle to tub, back and forth, your feet tracing a small, familiar path on the stone flags. The distance is only a few steps, but each trip is taken with care, your pace unhurried, your attention focused on the wool in your hands. You arrange the locks on the hurdle in a single layer, placing them side by side like pieces of a puzzle, their edges just touching but not overlapping. The fleece, which had been a compact mass, is now becoming a broad, flat sheet, a pale landscape on the woven willow. The fire hums quietly behind you as you work, its warmth reaching the hurdle and beginning the slow process of drying. You can feel the heat on your face and arms when you lean over the wool, a gentle, steady warmth that seems to wrap around each lock like a blanket. The steam rises from the wet fleece in thin, curling wisps, carrying with it the clean, faintly animal scent of the wool, a scent that is no longer of the field but of the cottage itself, warm and domestic. The steam curls up toward the dark beams and vanishes, absorbed by the dry air of the room, which has been heated all day by the fire. From time to time you pause and look over the hurdle, checking the arrangement of the locks. If one piece is too thick, you tease it apart a little more, pulling the fibres apart with your fingers until they lie in a thin, even layer. If another piece has curled at the edges, you smooth it down gently, pressing the curl flat with your thumb. The wool is so docile when wet, so willing to take whatever shape you give it, and you handle it with the same quiet patience you would use to settle a sleeping child. Your hands move in slow circular motions, smoothing and shaping, and the water continues to drip steadily into the pan below. The sound now a soft, continuous patter that is as soothing as the fall of rain on a thatch roof. The light in the room is changing. The afternoon has given way to early evening, and the window shows only a deep, featureless grey, the colour of the sky when the clouds press low and the sun has already set behind the hills. The candle, which has been burning on the table all this time, is now the brightest point in the room, aside from the fire, and its flame reflects in the wet wool as a scattering of tiny golden stars. You light a second candle and set it on the mantelpiece so that the light falls from two directions, illuminating the hurdle more evenly. The additional flame reveals new details: the delicate, feathery edges of the teased wool, the dark lines of the willow withies beneath, the fine droplets of water that cling to the underside of the lattice and tremble with each small movement of the air. You continue to carry the wool from the tub to the hurdle, and as the sheet of fleece grows larger, you begin to notice the subtle variations in the color of the locks. Some are almost white, the color of fresh milk, while others have a warmer tone, the color of oatmeal or the inner bark of the birch. These variations are natural, coming from different parts of the fleece, and they will blend together later when the wool is combed. For now, they lie beside each other in a quiet patchwork, a map of the sheep's body spread out on the willow screen. You know this fleece so intimately now, having touched every lock many times, and you could probably tell its story just by looking at its colors and textures. The soft, pale staples from the shoulders, the slightly longer ones from the flanks, the finer, crinkled pieces from the underside. The pan beneath the hurdle begins to fill with water, its surface trembling with each new drip. You pause to slide it out carefully and empty it into the bale bowl, then replace it, the tin making a hollow ringing sound as it settles on the stones. Then you return to the work, lifting the last few locks from the tub. These are the smallest pieces, the short and delicate ones that you set aside earlier for soft yarns, and you handle them with particular gentleness, spreading them into thin, airy wisps on the very edge of the hurdle. They look like little tufts of cloud, so light that they seem barely to touch the willow. When the last lock has been placed, you step back and look at the hurdle. It is entirely covered now with a single, even layer of wool, a soft, pale blanket that seems to glow in the combined light of the fire and the candles. The fleece has been transformed from a wet, heavy mass into this airy, open sheet, and the transformation is deeply satisfying in a quiet, wordless way. The wool will dry here overnight, losing its moisture slowly to the warm, dry air of the cottage, and by morning it will be light and springy, ready for the teasing and the combing. You think of this as you stand looking, your hands resting lightly on the edge of the hurdle. You notice a few places where the water has pooled in small depressions, tiny lakes on the surface of the wall. You touch these with your fingertips, breaking the surface tension, and the water drains away through the lattice with a soft sigh. You also notice a tiny wisp of hay still caught in one lock, a survivor of all the sorting and washing, and you pluck it out and drop it into the fire, where it flares and vanishes in an instant. The wool is now as clean as it can be, and all that remains is to let it dry. You pull the stool over near the hurdle and sit down, your back to the fire, your face toward the pale sheet of wool. The warmth of the flames is a steady pressure against your spine, and the light flickers gently on the wall in front of you. You fold your hands in your lap and simply watch the wool, the way it glistens and steams, the way the water drips steadily into the pan, the way the fibres seem to relax and settle as they release their moisture. The sound of the dripping is a soft, constant music, a series of tiny liquid notes that fall at random intervals and blend into a gentle, arrhythmic whole. It is a sound that would lull anyone to sleep, and you feel your own eyelids growing heavy as you sit. The cottage has grown very warm, the fire having been fed steadily all day, and the air is thick with the clean smell of drying wool. a smell that is almost sweet, like the scent of warm bread or fresh hay. You breathe it in deeply, letting it fill your lungs, and your body relaxes into the stool, your shoulders dropping, your hands going still in your lap. There is no more work to do for now, only the waiting, and the waiting is a kind of work in itself, a quiet, patient attendance on the natural process of evaporation. You think, in a dreamy, half-formed way, about the wool's journey so far. It has gone from the sheep's back to the shearer's hands, from the market to your door, from the bundle to the table, from the table to the tub, and now from the tub to the hurdle. Each step has been small and careful, and each step has brought the wool closer to its final form. And yet there is still so much to do, the teasing, the combing, the coiling into tops. The thought of all that future work does not weary you, it comforts you, because it means that there will be many more quiet hours by the fire, many more slow rhythmic tasks to fill the evenings. The wool is a companion as much as a material, a quiet presence that asks only patience and gives back calm. The dripping from the hurdle has slowed now, the intervals between drops growing longer. You look under the hurdle and see that the pan has collected perhaps a finger's depth of water, which catches the firelight and reflects it back in a trembling golden disk. The wool itself is already lighter in color, drying at the tips first, the very ends of the locks beginning to show their true creamy whiteness. The drying will continue all night, and by morning the fleece will be a different thing entirely, light and rustling and full of air. You rise after a while and go to the fire, adding a thick log of oak that will burn slowly and steadily through the night. You arrange the embers around it with the poker, banking them so that the warmth will last, and then you stand for a moment watching the new flames take hold. The fire is a living thing, a quiet, breathing companion, and you tend it with the same steady attention you give to the wool. When it is burning well, you turn back to the hurdle and make one final check, smoothing a few lifted edges, adjusting a lock that has shifted, and then you are satisfied. The evening has fully settled over the cottage now, the world outside lost in a deep, windless dark. The candles burn with tall, steady flames, and the fire glows warmly in the grate, and the wool rests on its hurdle like a pale, sleeping creature. You stand in the middle of the room, looking at all of this, and you feel the peace of the cottage settle into you, a peace that has been built slowly over the hours of quiet work, a peace as solid and real as the stones under your feet. You know that there is nothing more to do tonight except to let the wool dry, and so you turn down the candles, bank the fire a little lower, and prepare to leave the room to its slow, silent work, the drip of water and the breath of the flames. The only sounds in the deep, quiet dark. The morning comes quietly, a slow brightening of the small window from deep grey to pale silver, and you wake to the scent of dry wool and cold ash. The fire has burned down to a fine white dust during the night, only a few embers still glowing in the heart of the grate, and the air in the cottage is cool, but not sharp, carrying the clean, faintly sweet smell of the fleece. You rise from your bed in the corner, drawing the blanket around your shoulders for a moment, and your first act is to cross to the hurdle where the wool has rested all night. You look down at it in the early light, and what you see is a transformation. The fleece is no longer dark and wet and heavy, but light and pale and full of air. The locks spread across the willow lattice like drifts of fresh snow. Each staple has dried into its own soft shape, the crimp restored, the fibers standing away from each other in a fine, fluffy cloud. The color is the true color of the wool now, a warm, creamy white with the faintest golden undertone, and when you touch it with your fingertip, it springs back lightly, no longer cool or damp, but soft and alive. You lift one lock and hold it to the light from the window, and you can see the individual fibers, fine as spider silk, each one separate and clean. The washing and the drying have done their work perfectly, and now the wool is ready for the next stage, the teasing. You set about rekindling the fire, because the day's work will ask for warmth and light. You sweep the ash aside with a small iron shovel and lay a bed of dry kindling in the grate, thin splinters of pine and a few twists of birch bark that catch at once when you touch the candle flame to them. The fire wakes with a cheerful crackle, and you feed it with small twigs, then larger sticks, and finally a split log of beech that settles into the growing flames with a soft, steady roar. Warmth begins to spread through the room again, touching the stones, the beams, the hurdle, and your own cold hands, which you hold out to the flames for a moment before beginning. You take the wooden teasing board from its place against the wall, a flat, smooth plank of ash wood about the length of your arm and twice as wide as your hand. The board is pale from use, its surface polished by years of wool being drawn across it, and it has a small lip at one end that fits against your knees when you sit. You carry it to the hearth and set it across your lap as you settle onto the three-legged stool, positioning yourself so that the fire is on your left side and the light falls over your shoulder onto the board. To your right, you place an empty basket for the teased wool, and to your left, within easy reach, you set the first basket of dried locks taken from the hurdle. You lift the first lock and lay it on the board, spreading it out flat with a gentle sweep of your palm. The wool is so light that it seems almost to float above the wood, the fibers lifting and stirring in the warmth of the fire. You look at it for a moment, noting the way the crimp forms tiny regular waves along the length of the staple, the way the tips curl slightly, the way the cut ends are blunt and clean. Then you take hold of one end with your left hand, pinching it lightly between thumb and forefinger, and with your right hand you begin to draw the fibers away, pulling them lengthwise in a slow, steady motion. The teasing is a gentle pulling apart, not a breaking or a tearing, and it asks for a touch so light that the fibers separate without ever feeling the strain. You pull a small amount of wool from the lock, a thin, airy web of strands, and the fibers slide apart with a soft, silky whisper, the sound of order emerging from slight disorder. You lay this first web of teased wool in the basket to your right, where it settles like a tiny cloud, and then you return to the lock and draw again, pulling another thin layer from the mass. The motion is slow and rhythmic. Hold the lock, draw the fibers, release into the basket, hold the lock again. Your hands learn the exact texture of the wool, the places where it yields easily, and the places where it holds together more firmly. The teasing board is not a tool in the way that the combs are tools. It is simply a surface, a clean, smooth place where the work can happen. The real tool is your fingers, which become more sensitive as the morning goes on, learning to feel the slightest resistance, the tiniest knot or tangle. When you encounter a place where the fibers are slightly matted, you do not pull harder, but instead pause and tease with your fingertips, fluffing the wool apart strand by strand until the tangle loosens and becomes part of the general cloud. This takes patience, but patience is the whole substance of the work, and you have it in abundance. The pile of teased wool in the basket grows slowly, lock by lock, drawer by drawer. Each lock must be opened completely, reduced from its familiar staple shape into a soft, formless mass of separate fibres that will later be aligned by the combs. The teasing breaks the last of the natural order of the fleece, the arrangement that the sheep gave it, and prepares it for the new order that you will impose. It is a quiet, methodical undoing, and there is a deep calm in it, a sense of reducing the wool to its simplest, most elemental state. The fibres drift into the basket like thoughts settling into sleep, one by one, weightless and without urgency. The fire hums and crackles beside you, its warmth a steady presence on your left cheek and arm. The light flickers gently across the teasing board, catching the fine airborne fibres that lift from the wool and drift in the still air, tiny bright motes that dance and vanish. The room is very quiet except for the soft whisper of wool against wool and the occasional settling of a log in the grate. Outside the day has brightened a little, the window now a pale silvery rectangle, but no birds sing and no wind stirs, and the cottage remains wrapped in its own deep hush. You pause now and then to rest your hands, laying them flat on the board and feeling the smooth, cool wood under your palms. Your fingers are coated with the finest dust of wool, a soft, white bloom that makes them feel slightly sticky, and you rub them together absently, feeling the warmth of the friction. The scent of the wool is very faint now, just a clean, dry, almost dusty smell, like the smell of a hayloft in late summer. It is a comfortable smell, familiar and undemanding. You work through the first basket of dried locks, and when it is empty, you rise and go to the hurdle to fetch more. You take your time, walking slowly across the room, lifting the locks from the willow lattice with care so that they do not snag on the withies. The hurdle is perhaps half empty now, the layer of wool thinner, the dark lines of the woven branches showing through in more places. You carry the fresh locks back to the stool and sit down again, settling the board across your lap, and the work continues. The teased wool in the basket is a beautiful thing to look at, a soft, pale hill of unspun potential. It has no shape of its own, no structure beyond the gentle tangle of clean fibres, and it seems to glow in the firelight, the light penetrating into its depths and making it shine with a warm inner radiance. You reach down sometimes and run your fingers through it, feeling the incredible softness, the way the fibres slide and catch and slide again. It is like touching a cloud, if a cloud could be warm and dry and held in a basket. As you work, you discover the subtle differences between the locks that you had noticed during the sorting. The wool from the sheep's shoulders is finer and softer, teasing apart almost effortlessly into a silky, lustrous mass. The wool from the flanks is slightly longer and stronger, the fibres more resilient, asking for a little more pressure to separate. The wool from the belly, the short and crinkled pieces, is the softest of all but also the most likely to contain tiny tangles, little nests of fibre that must be patiently worked open. You handle each type according to its nature, adjusting your touch without thinking, and the three kinds of wool mingle in the basket, their differences blending into a general softness. The morning passes in this slow, steady rhythm, the light through the window shifting almost imperceptibly as the sun moves behind the clouds. You are not aware of time in any measured way. There is only the lock in your hands, the drawer of the fibres, the drift of the teased wool into the basket, the next lock waiting on the board. The task is so simple and so repetitive, that it becomes a kind of meditation, your mind resting on the work as lightly as the wool rests on the wood. No thoughts intrude, no worries or plans. There is only the present moment, warm and quiet and full of soft white fibres. At one point you pause to tend the fire, which has burned down to a bed of bright coals. You add another log, a thick piece of oak that will burn for a long time, and you push the coals together with the poker so that the new wood catches. The flames leap up, fresh and lively, and the room brightens. You stand for a moment stretching your back and your arms, feeling the pleasant ache of long sitting, and then you walk to the door and open it a crack. The outside air is cool and damp, smelling of wet earth and fallen leaves, and you breathe it in deeply, a refreshing change from the dry warmth of the cottage. A few drops of rain have fallen in the night, leaving the ground dark and the thatch dripping softly, but now the skies are pale, even grey, and no rain falls. You stand in the doorway for a little while, letting the cool air wash over you, and then you close the door and return to the fire. You sit down again and draw the basket of teased wool closer, looking at the pile you have made. It is perhaps half the total fleece, a generous mound of soft, open fibres, and the sight of it gives you a quiet sense of progress. The teasing is the slowest part of the whole process, the part that asks for the most patience and the lightest touch, and you are content to let it take as long as it takes. There is no deadline, no quota, no purpose beyond the work itself, and the work is its own reward. You lift the next lock and lay it on the board, and your fingers begin their familiar motion once more. The wool yields as it has yielded 100 times already, the fibres sliding apart in a fine, even web, and you watch the way the firelight shines through them, turning each strand into a thin line of gold. The sound of the teasing is a soft, continuous shush, a whisper that blends with the crackle of the fire and the distant, almost inaudible rustle of the thatch. It is a sound that could go on forever, and you would be content to listen to it forever, sitting on the three-legged stool with the warmth on your face and the wool in your hands. The basket of teased wool grows fuller, the locks from the hurdle grow fewer, and the afternoon begins to deepen almost without your noticing. The light through the window takes on a slightly bluer tone, the grey of early dusk, and the fire seems to burn brighter as the room around it darkens. You light a candle and set it on the mantelpiece, not because you need it yet, but because the small steady flame is a comfort, a companion to the fire. The candle flame reflects in the polished wood of the teasing board a tiny upside-down star. You tease the last few locks with particular care, because they are the smallest and softest, the underbelly wool that feels like down. These fibres are so fine that they seem to dissolve under your fingers, separating into a mist of softness that drifts into the basket like a breath. When the final lock has been drawn apart and the board is clean, you sit for a moment with your hands resting on the wood, feeling the quiet satisfaction of completion. The teasing is done. The fleece, which began as a rolled bundle of dirty locks, is now a basket full of soft, separate fibres, ready for the warming of the combs and the careful drawing that will come next. You stand and stretch, and then you carry the basket of teased wool to the table, setting it in the place of honour near the centre. You cover it with a clean cloth to keep the dust off, tucking the edges down gently, and then you return to the hurdle. The hurdle is empty now, only a few stray fibres clinging to the withies, and you lift it from the stools and lean it back against the wall. The pan beneath it has a small amount of water still in it, which you carry to the door and pour out onto the ground. The day is ending, the light fading, and the cottage is warm and still. You stand in the middle of the room, looking at the covered basket on the table, and you feel the deep, quiet peace of a day spent in slow, careful work. A peace that settles into you like the fibres settling into the basket, layer upon soft layer. The basket of teased wool rests under its linen cloth in the center of the table, a soft, pale mound of unspun potential, and now the time has come to prepare the tools that will turn that cloud of separate fibres into smooth, ordered ropes ready for the spinner. You go to the chimney breast, where two long-toothed iron cones hang from a sturdy wooden peg, driven deep into the stone. They have hung there for as long as you can remember, their dark shapes familiar against the soot-blackened wall, and when you lift them down one at a time, they are cool and heavy in your hands, the weight of old iron and seasoned wood. The combs are a pair, each consisting of a rectangular iron head set with a double row of steel tines, the teeth long and slender and sharply pointed, arranged in a precise, even line like the spines of some quiet industrial creature. The tines are perhaps the length of your longest finger, polished to a dull, silvery gleam from years of passing through wool, and they are set at a slight angle so that they will draw through the fibres with a smooth, even resistance. Below the iron head, each comb has a wooden handle turned from beechwood, shaped to fit the grip of a hand, its surface dark with use and smoothed to a soft, waxy finish. The handles are warm to the touch almost at once, drawing the heat from your palms. You carry the combs across the room and set them on the hearthstone, not in the fire, but near enough to take the chill from the metal. The hearthstone is a wide, flat slab of local granite, its surface pitted and worn from years of heat and ash, and it radiates a gentle, even warmth that rises into the iron teeth. You lay the combs side by side, their tines pointing away from the flames, their handles resting on a folded rag to keep them clean. The firelight catches the steel points and makes them glint, each tine tipped with a tiny orange spark, as if the teeth themselves are already hungry for the wool. While the combs warm, you prepare the workspace. You draw the three-legged stool close to the hearth, positioning it so that the light from the fire will fall over your right shoulder, illuminating the work without casting shadows across your hands. The stool is exactly the right height for combing, allowing your arms to move freely and your back to remain straight, and its wooden seat has a shallow depression worn into it by years of sitting, a gentle curve that matches the shape of your body. You sit down for a moment to test the position, adjusting the stool by a finger's breadth, and then you rise again to bring the baskets. On your left side you place the basket of teased wool, the one you filled so patiently at the teasing board. Its contents a soft, airy mass of clean, separate fibres. You remove the linen cloth and fold it, setting it aside on the table, and the wool seems to breathe in the firelight, the fibres stirring faintly in the warm air. The scent of the wool is clean and dry, a faint, dusty sweetness that mingles with the beechwood smoke. On your right side you place an empty basket, a slightly deeper one woven of willow withies, its interior smooth and free of splinters, waiting to receive the finished tops, the long, smooth coils of combed wool that will be the final product of the evening's work. Between the two baskets, directly in front of the stool, you position a low wooden block, A piece of solid oak about the size of a small footstool, its top surface flat and smooth. This block will serve as a rest for the stationary comb, holding it steady while you work. You set the block carefully, aligning it with the hearthstone so that the warmth from the fire reaches it, and then you step back and look at the arrangement. Baskets left and right, block in the center, stool before the block, combs warming on the hearth, fire glowing behind. Everything is in its place. A small, ordered world ready for the quiet ritual of combing. Now you go to the fire and kneel before it, reaching out to touch the handles of the combs. The wood has grown warm, taking on the heat of the hearthstone, and the iron heads are no longer cold but lukewarm, the chill entirely gone from them. You lift one comb and hold it close to your face, feeling the faint warmth radiating from the tines, and you run your thumb lightly across the points. They are not sharp enough to cut, but pointed enough to catch and hold the wool, and they make a soft, musical sound when you brush them, a faint, high-pitched tang like the distant ring of a small bell. The sound is a pleasant one, a promise of work to come. You set that comb down and lift the other, giving it the same attention. Both combs are now warm and ready, their metal teeth at the perfect temperature to slide through the wool without snagging or catching, warm enough to ease the fibres, but not so hot as to damage them. You carry them to the block and set one on the wooden surface, its tines pointing upward like a steel flower, and the other you hold in your right hand, feeling the smooth, warm handle settle into your palm as if it belongs there. Before you begin to comb, you sit for a moment on the stool and let the stillness of the room gather around you. The fire hums its low, constant note, and the candle on the mantelpiece burns with a tall, steady flame, its light combining with the firelight to fill the room with a warm, golden glow. Your shadow is cast large and motionless on the wall behind you, the only figure in a world made small and still. The baskets wait patiently, the wool breathes softly, and the combs lie ready on the block. There is no hurry, no urgency, no sound but the quiet breath of the flames and your own slow, steady respiration. You reach into the basket on your left and take up a handful of teased wool, a soft, airy tuft that seems to have no weight at all. You hold it for a moment, feeling the warmth of the fibres, the way they cling together just slightly from their own natural grip, and then you turn your attention to the stationary comb on the block. This is the comb that will hold the wool, the fixed point against which the other comb will draw. You begin to fill its teeth, taking small amounts of wool and pressing them firmly onto the tines. The process of filling the comb is slow and deliberate. You push the wool down onto the steel points, feeling the fibres catch and hold, and you build up layer upon layer until the entire double row of teeth is covered with a thick, even beard of pale wool. The fibres stand out from the tines in all directions, a soft, fluffy mass that looks like a handful of cloud caught on a metal rake. You smooth the wool with your palm, pressing it down gently to ensure that every tine is fully loaded, that the fibres are evenly distributed along the length of the comb. The wool resists just slightly, springing back under your hand, and then it settles into place. With the stationary comb filled, you pause and look at it for a moment. The firelight shines through the wool, making it glow with a warm golden light, and the steel tines are hidden now, buried in the soft pale mass. The comb looks like a strange, quiet animal, its teeth replaced by a cloud of fleece, and the sight of it is deeply satisfying in a way that has nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with the simple, orderly progression of the work. You reach for the moving comb, the one you will hold in your hand, and you settle it into your grip, feeling the balance of it, the way the weight of the iron head counterpoints the length of the wooden handle. You take a breath, slow and deep, and then you lift the moving comb and bring it toward the stationary one. The two combs face each other, their tines parallel, and you begin the first stroke. The moving comb slides through the wool on the stationary comb, its teeth passing between the stationary teeth with a soft, silky hiss. The sound is a whisper, a gentle, rhythmic shushing that fills the room like the fall of fine rain on a still lake. The fibres catch and pull, and as the moving comb draws through, it lifts a portion of the wool away, straightening and aligning the fibres as they pass from one set of tines to the other. You draw the comb through slowly, steadily, feeling the faint resistance of the wool, a resistance that is not a struggle, but a kind of quiet conversation between the steel and the fibre. The wool yields to the comb, and the comb teaches the wool to lie straight, to arrange itself in parallel lines, to abandon its soft, tangled individuality and become part of an ordered whole. The sound of the drawing is the only sound in the room now, a soft, continuous whisper that seems to hold the cottage in a trance. Even the fire seems to burn more quietly, its crackle subdued, its flame still and tall. When the moving comb has passed fully through the stationary wool, you stop and lift it away. A thin layer of fibres now clings to its teeth, a fine, even web of wool that has been drawn straight and aligned. You set the moving comb aside for a moment, resting it on the block, and with your fingers you begin to strip the wool from its tines, pulling the fibres away in a long, smooth rope. This rope is called a top, and it is the first true product of the combing, a continuous, orderly strand of parallel fibres that is ready for spinning. You coil the top lightly in the basket to your right, laying it in a loose, even spiral, and then you turn back to the combs. The stationary comb still holds the majority of the wool, its tines still buried in the soft, pale mass. You lift the moving comb again and make a second stroke, drawing it through the stationary wool with the same slow, steady motion. Again the soft hiss fills the room, and again a thin layer of fibres is lifted and aligned. You strip these fibres from the moving comb and add them to the coil in the basket, and then you make a third stroke and a fourth. The work cycles: fill the comb, draw the comb, strip the fibres, coil the top. The repetition folds time into a quiet blanket, each cycle identical to the last, each cycle a small, complete world of motion and stillness. The wool on the stationary comb grows thinner with each stroke, the fibres gradually transferring to the moving comb and then to the basket. You can see the steel tines beginning to show through the remaining wool, their points emerging like the tips of distant mountains. When the stationary comb is nearly empty, you pause and gather the last few fibres, the short and slightly tangled ones that did not draw through cleanly. These you set aside in a small pile, the waste wool that can be used for rougher yarns or for stuffing cushions. Nothing is wasted. Everything has its place and its purpose. Then you reach into the basket on your left and take up another handful of teased wool, pressing it onto the stationary comb as you did before, filling the teeth with a fresh, soft load. The comb is heavy with wool again, its steel tines hidden, and the work begins anew. Fill, draw, strip, coil. The rhythm is as steady as a heartbeat, as calm as breathing, and you let it carry you along without thought or effort. Your hands know what to do, and your mind is free to rest in the warm golden light. The soft hiss of the combs, the gentle crackle of the fire. The light in the room changes almost imperceptibly as the evening deepens, the fire becoming the only bright source as the window darkens to a deep, featureless grey. You light another candle and set it on the block beside the stationary comb, so that the flame illuminates the teeth and the wool directly, casting a clear, bright light on the work. The candle flame is steady in the still air, its reflection caught in the polished steel tines, a tiny bright star repeated over and over. The shadows dance gently on the walls, your own shadow moving only slightly, in rhythm with your arms. The basket of teased wool on your left grows slowly emptier, and the basket of finished tops on your right grows slowly fuller. The coils of wool lie in their basket like sleeping ribbons, each one a smooth, even rope of parallel fibres, their colour a soft, warm cream. You pause sometimes to look at them, to run your finger lightly over a coil, feeling the incredible smoothness of the combed wool, the way the fibres lie flat and straight, each one aligned with its neighbours. It is a beautiful thing, this ordered wool, and its beauty is quiet and humble, the beauty of a thing well made, a process carefully followed. The fire burns down to a bed of bright coals, and you pause in the combing to tend it, laying another log on the embers and watching the new flames catch. The warmth washes over you, a fresh wave of comfort, and you sit for a moment with your hands in your lap, letting the heat soak into your fingers. The wool combing has made your hands feel very soft, the lanolin from the earlier handling still faintly present, a natural balm that leaves the skin supple and smooth. You rub your fingertips together, feeling the slight residue, and then you return to the work. The evening is deep now, the world outside lost in a vast, quiet darkness, but inside the cottage there is only the warm circle of firelight, the steady whisper of the combs, the slow, patient rhythm of your hands. You fill the stationary comb again and again, drawing the moving comb through with the same slow, even motion, stripping the aligned fibres and coiling them in the basket. The work seems to have no beginning and no end, only the present moment, the wool and the steel and the fire and the quiet. It is enough, and more than enough, and you are content to let it continue for as long as it will. The combs lie warm in your hands, their wooden handles carrying the deep stored heat of the hearthstone, their iron heads and steel tines now at the perfect temperature to receive the wool. You settle yourself on the three-legged stool, drawing it a little closer to the block where the stationary comb stands waiting, and you arrange your body so that the firelight falls over your right shoulder in a steady, golden sheet. The light catches every surface in the room with a soft glow, the dark beams overhead, the stone flags underfoot, the pale wicker of the baskets, and most of all the two combs, which gleam with a dull, silvery sheen that seems almost liquid in the shifting warmth. You take a breath, slow and even, and let the quiet of the cottage settle around you like a second, softer blanket, a quiet made of small, familiar sounds, the hum of the fire, the distant tick of cooling stone, the faint rustle of the wool in the basket as it breathes in the warmth. You reach into the basket on your left, the one filled with teased wool, and your fingers sink into the soft, airy mass with a sensation like touching a cloud that has been warmed by the sun. The fibres cling to each other just slightly, held by their own delicate scales, and you lift a handful that seems to weigh nothing at all, a pale, fluffy tuft that glows in the firelight. You hold it for a moment, looking at the way the light shines through the thin places, turning the wool to a soft, buttery gold. And then you turn to the stationary comb which rises from the wooden block, with its double row of teeth pointing upward, waiting. Filling the stationary comb is a task you have done so many times that your hands know it without any thought. But tonight, with the fire burning low and steady and the candles lit against the dark window, the task feels especially quiet, especially slow. You take a small amount of the teased wool and press it down onto the steel tines, pushing it firmly but gently, so that the teeth pierce the fibres and hold them fast. The wool catches with a faint, sighing sound, a soft release of air, and it stands up from the comb in a rough, fluffy tuft that quivers slightly with the movement. You add another small amount, pressing it beside the first, and then another, working your way along the double row of teeth from one end to the other, with the same patient, methodical care you would use to plant seeds in a furrow. The wool builds up on the comb in layers, each new tuft blending into the ones beside it, until the entire set of teeth is covered with a thick, even beard of pale fleece. The fibres stand out in all directions, a soft, unruly cloud that hides the steel completely, and the comb looks now like a strange, quiet creature, its iron heart buried under a coat of cream-colored wool. You smooth the surface with your palm, pressing the fibres down just enough to ensure that every tine is fully loaded, that no tooth is bare and no spot is overloaded. The wool resists slightly under your hand, springing back with its own soft resilience, and when you lift your palm away, the surface rises again, settling into a gentle, undulating landscape of pale peaks and valleys that catches the firelight and holds it. With the stationary comb filled to your satisfaction, you sit back on the stool and rest your hands on your thighs. You let the stillness of the room gather around you, the fire humming its low, constant note, the candle flames standing tall and unwavering in the motionless air. Your eyes travel across the loaded comb, following the way the firelight travels along each steel point that is now hidden, but whose location you know by the way the wool bulges slightly, the way the fibres part around the invisible tines. The light seems to sink into the wool, spreading through it like water through a sponge, illuminating every crimp, every tiny curve of fibre, and the whole mass glows with a warm, inner radiance that is deeply peaceful to look at. You breathe slowly, in and out, letting your shoulders drop, letting the day's small tensions dissolve into the heat of the fire. When the stillness is full, when the room seems to hold its breath along with you, you reach for the moving comb with your right hand. The handle fits your palm as if it were made for you alone, the smooth, warm beechwood settling against your skin with a familiar, comfortable weight. The iron head of the comb is balanced perfectly, the long steel tines pointing away from your hand, their points glinting faintly in the candlelight. You lift the comb slowly, bringing it across your body toward the stationary comb, and the two tools face each other like two quiet partners about to begin a slow, familiar dance. The first drawing is a moment of particular care because it sets the tone for all the strokes that will follow. You position the moving comb just above the wool on the stationary comb, its tines parallel to the stationary comb, its tines parallel to the stationary tines, their points nearly touching the outermost fibres. You pause there for a heartbeat, feeling the slight tension in your wrist. the gentle readiness in your arm, and then you begin to draw the moving comb through the wool. The motion is slow, steady, and deliberate, the comb descending through the fibres with a soft, silky hiss that fills the room, like the sound of a light rain beginning to fall on still water. As the tines of the moving comb slide between the tines of the stationary comb, they catch the wool and begin to pull it away, fibre by fibre, in a thin, even web. The sensation in your hand is a faint, steady resistance, a soft tug that is not a struggle but a conversation, the steel asking the wool to yield and the wool yielding gracefully, releasing itself from one set of teeth to be gathered by the other. The sound of the drawing is the only sound in the room now, a gentle rhythmic shushing that seems to hush even the fire, and you find yourself matching your breathing to it, inhaling as the comb descends, exhaling as it rises. The first stroke ends when the moving comb has passed fully through the wool, emerging on the far side with a thin layer of fibres clinging to its teeth. You lift the comb away and hold it in front of you, looking at the wool it has gathered. The fibres lie across the tines in a fine, even film. Their ends are lined for the first time into something approaching order, their crimp still visible, but now stretched and straightened. The colour of the wool in this thin layer is a pale, warm cream, and the firelight shines through it, revealing the almost transparent quality of each individual strand. You turn the comb slightly, and the light shifts across the fibres, a soft shimmer like the surface of a calm sea under a grey sky. You do not strip the wool from the moving comb yet, because the first drawing is not complete with a single stroke. You return the moving comb to its starting position above the stationary wool, and you draw it through a second time, with the same slow, even motion, the same soft hiss, the same faint resistance. This second stroke gathers another thin layer of fibres, lifting them from the depths of the stationary load and aligning them with the first. The sound is just as gentle, just as steady, and the room remains wrapped in its quiet spell. Nothing else moves. Even the candle flame holds its shape without a tremble, as if it too is listening to the soft whisper of the combs. You make a third stroke, and a fourth, each one identical to the last in its slowness and its care, each one lifting a little more wool from the stationary comb and transferring it to the moving comb, where the fibres build up into a thicker, fluffier layer. The stationary comb begins to show signs of its emptying. The wool that remains on its teeth is thinner now, the steel points beginning to emerge in places, their dark tips breaking through the pale fleece like rocks through a retreating tide. You can see the way the fibres that remain are the shorter ones, the ones that did not catch as easily on the moving tines, and you know that they will need a slightly different touch. After the sixth or seventh stroke, you pause and set the moving comb down on the block beside the stationary one, its tines pointing upward, the gathered wool a soft, pale mass that trembles slightly with the movement. You flex your fingers, feeling the pleasant, mild ache of the careful grip, and then you turn your attention to the wool on the moving comb. It is time to strip the fibres from the teeth, to draw them away in a long, smooth rope that will be the first true top of the evening. You take hold of the wool at the very base of the tines, pinching it gently between thumb and forefinger, and you begin to pull it away from the comb in a slow, steady motion. The fibres release from the steel with a soft, tearing whisper, a sound that is almost but not quite silence, and they come away in a long, continuous strand that hangs from your fingers like a ribbon of pale silk. You pull carefully, keeping the tension even so that the fibres remain aligned and the top grows longer and longer, a smooth, orderly rope of parallel wool that seems to glow in the firelight. When the last fibres have left the teeth, you hold the top in both hands, feeling its incredible softness, its lightness, the way it drapes over your palms like a living thing at rest. You coil this first top in the basket to your right, laying it in a loose, even spiral against the wicker bottom. The coil is small and modest, the beginning of what will become a full basket of such coils, but it is perfect in its own quiet way, a promise of all the tops to come. You smooth it with your fingertip, tucking the loose end under so that it will not tangle, and then you sit back and look at it for a moment, a single pale ring in the basket, simple and complete. The stationery comb is not yet empty, and so you return to it. The remaining wool clings to the teeth in thin patches, mostly the shorter fibres that did not draw through on the first passes. You take up the moving comb again and make several more strokes, each one lighter than the last, teasing the final fibres from the stationery tines. These shorter fibres resist a little more, asking for a gentler hand, and you give them that gentleness without thought, adjusting the angle of the comb, the speed of the draw, until the last of the wool has been lifted away. The stationery comb stands bare now, its steel teeth exposed and gleaming, a little residue of lanolin giving them a faint, silky sheen. You strip these final fibres from the moving comb and add them to the coil in the basket, and then you set both combs down on the block and rest your hands in your lap. The quiet of the room returns, deeper now than before, as if the combing has added its own layer of stillness to the air. You listen to the fire, which has burned down to a deep, glowing bed of coals, its light a steady ruby-red pulse that paints the walls with soft shadows. The candle flames stand tall and still, their light a clear golden note against the darker corners of the room. You sit like this for a long moment, letting the peace of the work settle into you. The first drawing is complete, and it has been everything it should be. Slow, careful, quiet, a gentle beginning to the long evening of combing. The wool has begun its transformation from a cloud of separate fibres into ordered, parallel strands, and the process will continue, load by load, stroke by stroke, until the entire basket of teased wool has been turned into a basket of smooth, coiled tops. But that is for later, for the many quiet hours that still lie ahead. For now, you simply sit, breathing in the warm, wool-scented air, feeling the heat of the fire on your skin, and letting the stillness hold you in its gentle, patient embrace. The moving comb rests on the block with its teeth still holding a thin, airy film of fibres, the last remnants of the first load, and you strip them away with a slow, even pull that leaves the steel bare and gleaming. You coil this final wisp into the basket, tucking it beside the first small top, and then you sit for a moment with your hands resting lightly on your thighs, listening to the fire's low hum. The room is warm and still, the candle flames standing as tall and unwavering as painted things, and the night beyond the window has deepened to a complete seamless dark that presses gently against the glass like a soft black cloth. You breathe in the scent of warm wool and beechwood smoke, and then you reach again into the basket on your left, your fingers sinking into the teased fleece to gather a fresh handful for the stationery comb. This second load feels slightly different from the first. The fibres a little finer perhaps, coming from the part of the fleece that lay along the sheep's shoulder, where the wool is softest and most even. You press the wool onto the steel tines with the same patient, methodical care, building up the beard of pale fibres layer by layer until the teeth are once more completely hidden beneath a soft, undulating mass that catches the firelight and holds it in 1,000 tiny glowing points. You smooth the surface with your palm, feeling the springiness of the wool, the way it yields and then returns, and when the comb is filled to your satisfaction, you lift the moving comb and begin the first stroke of this new cycle, drawing the tines through the stationary wool with a slow, steady motion that makes the soft hiss rise again into the quiet room. The sound of the combing is a constant now, a gentle rhythmic shushing that seems to come from the wool itself, as if the fibres are whispering to each other as they are drawn straight. Stroke after stroke you work, the moving comb descending through the stationary wool, lifting a thin web of aligned fibres with each pass. And after 5 or 6 strokes you pause to strip the moving comb clean, gathering the fibres into a long, smooth rope that you coil carefully in the basket to your right. This top is slightly longer than the first, the fibres flowing in an unbroken ribbon of pale cream, and you lay it in the basket with the same light, circular motion, letting it settle beside its neighbour like a sleeping ribbon come to rest. The coil sits quietly in the wicker, its surface smooth and even, the fibres lying parallel and straight, and you smooth the loose end under with your thumb before returning to the work. The stationary comb is not yet empty, so you take up the moving comb again and make several more strokes, each one lighter than the last, as the remaining wool grows thinner on the teeth. The shorter fibres, the ones that did not catch as easily, ask for a gentler angle and a slower draw, and you give them both without thinking, your hands adjusting automatically to the changing resistance. When the stationary comb stands bare once more, its steel teeth gleaming with a faint silky residue, you strip the last fibres from the moving comb and add them to the coil, which now holds the entire yield of the second load, a modest but complete ring of smooth ordered wool. You do not pause between loads now, because the rhythm has fully taken hold of you, and the work flows from one stage to the next without any conscious decision. Your left hand reaches into the teased wool, your right hand presses the fibres onto the stationary comb, the moving comb rises and falls in its slow, steady arc, and the soft hiss of drawing fills the room like a quiet breath. The process folds time into a gentle, repeating pattern that has no sharp edges, no beginnings or endings, only the smooth, continuous flow of wool from basket to comb, from comb to top, from top to coil. You are aware of the fire burning low on your left, its warmth, a steady pressure against your cheek and arm, and you are aware of the candles on the mantelpiece and the block, their flames tall and still, but these awarenesses are soft and distant, like things seen through a thin veil of sleep. The center of your world is the wool, the combs, the slow transformation of disorder into order. The third load is a mixture of fibres, some long and some short, some fine and some slightly coarser, and this variety gives the combing a subtle texture that keeps your hands interested without ever startling them. The longer fibres draw through easily in the first few strokes, leaving a thin, even web on the moving comb, while the shorter ones cling to the stationary teeth a little longer, asking for a few extra passes. You accommodate this without breaking rhythm, simply adding a stroke or two where needed, stripping the moving comb when it is full, and returning to the stationary wool until it too is empty. The top that results from this third load is a little thicker in some places than in others, a gentle, natural variation that will blend out when the wool is spun, and you coil it in the basket with the same light, circular motion, adding it to the growing spiral of pale ribbons. The basket of teased wool on your left is slowly but steadily shrinking, its soft, airy mound settling lower and lower as handful after handful is taken. You notice this without any sense of urgency, because the work is its own time, and the amount of wool remaining is simply a fact, not a deadline. The basket of tops on your right is filling at the same patient pace, the coils lying side by side in the wicker like a family of quiet, pale creatures nestled together for warmth. The sight of them gives you a feeling that is too mild to be called satisfaction, a simple, quiet acknowledgement that the work is progressing, that the wool is becoming what it is meant to be. Outside, the night has grown completely still, the darkness pressing against the cottage like a held breath, and no sound comes through the thick walls except perhaps the faintest, almost imaginary rustle of a breeze in the distant trees. Inside, the fire is the only source of warmth and light aside from the candles, and it has burned down to a deep, glowing bed of coals that pulses with a soft, regular rhythm, brightening and dimming in a slow, steady cycle that seems to match the rhythm of your own breathing. You pause in the combing long enough to place another log on the fire, a thick piece of birch that catches at once with a cheerful crackle, and the fresh flames leap up, filling the room with a renewed wave of warmth and light. You stand for a moment, stretching your back and your arms, feeling the pleasant, mild ache of long sitting, and you walk the few steps to the door to open it a crack and breathe in the cool, damp night air. The darkness outside is absolute, the sky overcast and starless, and the air smells of wet earth and fallen leaves, a clean, cold scent that clears your head before you close the door and return to the fire. You settle back onto the stool and draw the basket of teased wool a little closer, because the shrinking pile is now slightly out of easy reach. The wool that remains is the wool from the very heart of the fleece, the longest and finest staples that you saved for last because they require the least effort and give the most beautiful tops. You take a generous handful and press it onto the stationary comb, and the fibres catch at once with a soft, eager sigh, as if they have been waiting for this moment. The comb fills quickly, the long staples draping over the teeth in a thick, lustrous curtain that shines with a pearly sheen in the firelight. You smooth it down and then lift the moving comb, and the first stroke is like drawing a spoon through thick cream, so smooth and effortless that you almost smile. The long fibres align beautifully, sliding into parallel lines with a minimum of strokes, and the moving comb lifts away thick, even webs of wool that strip off into long, flawless tops, each one a continuous ribbon of pale, silky fibre that seems to glow with its own inner light. You coil these tops in the basket with particular care, because they are the finest of the fleece, the ones that will make the smoothest, strongest yarn, and they deserve to be handled gently. The coils lie in the basket like rings of pale silk, their surfaces so smooth that they reflect the firelight in a soft, diffuse glow, and the basket is now more than half full, a rich harvest of ordered wool. The work continues, load after load, stroke after stroke, coil after coil, the rhythm so steady and so deep that you almost forget you are the one doing it. Your hands move with a knowledge of their own, filling, drawing, stripping, coiling, while your mind rests in a quiet, open space that is neither thought nor sleep, but something between them, a calm, floating awareness that drifts on the soft hiss of the combs and the warm glow of the fire. Time becomes a soft, elastic thing that stretches and contracts without any relation to clocks or bells, marked only by the slow shrinking of the teased wool and the slow growth of the coiled tops. The night deepens around you, the world outside wrapped in its own silent darkness, but you remain in this small circle of light where wool becomes a soft line of order, a quiet, orderly procession of fibres moving from chaos to calm. At intervals you pause to tend the fire or to trim the candle wicks, small automatic gestures that barely interrupt the flow of the work. The fire is burned through the birch log and settled again into a bed of coals, which you stir with the poker to bring a fresh glow to the surface. The candles have burned down by a finger's width, their flames now sitting a little lower in their holders, and you pour the pooled tallow away from the wicks so that they will burn cleanly. These small acts of maintenance are as much a part of the rhythm as the combing itself, and they slip into the pattern without breaking it, like a stone skipping once on a smooth pond and then sinking. The basket of teased wool is nearly empty now, only a thin layer of fibres remaining at the bottom, the last remnants of the fleece that you opened and sorted and washed and teased. You gather these final wisps with care, pressing them onto the stationary comb in a thin, even layer that barely covers the teeth, and you make the last strokes of the evening with a particular gentleness, as if saying farewell to the wool that has been your companion through so many quiet hours. The final fibres draw through cleanly, leaving the stationary comb bare and gleaming, and you strip the moving comb one last time, gathering the very last of the fleece into a short but perfect top that you coil in the basket with all the others. The basket of tops is now full, the coils lying in a soft, pale heap that rises slightly above the rim, and the basket of teased wool is empty, only a few stray fibres clinging to the wicker sides. You set the combs down on the block and rest your hands in your lap, letting the quiet of the room wash over you. The fire hums softly, the candles burn steadily, and the night outside is deep and dark and silent. You look at the basket of tops, at the many coils of smooth, ordered wool that represent the work of the evening, and you feel a quiet sense of completion that has no edge, no sharpness, only a soft, diffuse warmth that spreads through your chest like the warmth of the fire on your skin. The fleece has passed through your hands from beginning to end, from the rough, dirty bundle that came through the door to these pale silken ribbons, and the transformation is as quiet and natural as the turning of the seasons. You sit for a long time, simply breathing, simply being, while the fire burns low and the candles gutter softly and the wool rests in its basket, patient and complete. The final coil of wool rests in the basket among its many companions, a soft, pale ring of aligned fibres that still holds the faint warmth of your hands. You sit on the three-legged stool with your palms resting lightly on your thighs, your breathing slow and even, your body warm from the fire and the long, quiet work. The combs lie on the wooden block before you, their steel tines still holding a few stray wisps of wool, tiny, almost invisible threads that catch the candlelight and glint like fragments of spider silk. The room around you is deep in the stillness of late night, the fire burned down to a bed of ruby coals that pulse with a soft, regular glow. The candles on the mantelpiece and the block burning steadily, but lower now, their flame shorter and more golden as the tallow pools around the wicks. The window shows nothing but a deep, featureless darkness, the kind of night that comes when the clouds hang low and the moon is hidden, a night that wraps the cottage in a complete and silent embrace. You do not rise immediately, because there is no need to hurry, and because the quiet of the room is so full and so peaceful that to move would feel like breaking something delicate. You sit instead and let your eyes travel slowly over the scene before you, the two combs, the wooden block, the basket of finished tops on your right, the empty basket that once held teased wool on your left, the dark beams overhead, the iron kettle on its hook, the small clay pot of salt on the mantelpiece, the dried herbs hanging from the rafter. Every object is in its proper place, and every object seems to glow with a soft inner light, as if the long hours of patient work have imbued the whole cottage with a quiet, settled peace that is almost visible. You breathe in the scent of the room, which is the scent of clean wool and beechwood smoke, and the faint fading trace of tallow from the candles, a warm, comfortable blend that has become as familiar to you as your own skin. After a time you reach forward and take up the moving comb from the block, feeling its weight in your hand, the smooth, warm handle that has become an extension of your fingers over the many hours of combing. You hold it close to the candle flame and examine the steel tines, which are no longer clean and gleaming, but coated with a fine, almost invisible residue of lanolin, a soft, silky film that is built up from the wool. The residue is the last trace of the fleece's natural grease, and it must be removed before the combs are put away so that the steel will stay bright and free of rust. You reach for the scrap of clean linen that hangs from the edge of the table, a square of soft, worn cloth kept for this purpose, and you begin to wipe the tines of the moving comb with slow, careful strokes. The cloth moves along each tooth individually, starting at the base where the steel meets the iron head, and drawing outward to the point, and the lamellin comes away as a faint, dull sheen on the linen, barely visible, but leaving the steel brighter and cleaner with each pass. You work your way along the double row of teeth, one tine at a time, turning the comb in your hand to reach every side, and the motion is as slow and methodical as the combing itself. A final act of care for the tools that have served you so well. The cloth makes a soft, rustling sound as it moves over the metal, a whisper that is the only sound in the room besides the low hum of the fire and the occasional soft plink of a drop of tallow falling into the candle holder. When the moving comb is clean to your satisfaction, you set it aside on the block and lift the stationary comb, which is still mounted in its wooden rest. You wipe its tines with the same patient, methodical care, drawing the linen cloth along each tooth, removing the faint film of lanolin and the few stray fibres that still cling to the points. The stationary comb is slightly more difficult to clean because the tines are fixed in the block, but you manage it by turning the cloth around your finger to reach the inner sides of the teeth, and after a few minutes of quiet, careful work, both combs are clean and gleaming, their steel tines bright in the candlelight, ready to be put away until the next fleece arrives. You fold the soiled linen cloth and set it aside for washing, then rise from the stool and carry the combs across the room to the chimney breast. The wooden peg that holds them is dark with age and firmly set in the stone, and you lift each comb in turn, fitting the hole in the end of each handle over the peg, so that the combs hang side by side with their tines pointing downward, their iron heads dark against the soot-blackened wall. They settle into place with a soft wooden clunk, a final, definitive sound that marks the end of the combing, and you stand for a moment looking at them, remembering the many hours of quiet work they have just performed, the countless strokes through the wool, the soft, steady hiss of drawing, the transformation of chaos into order. The combs are silent now, resting, and you feel a quiet kinship with them, as if you and the tools have shared something important and wordless. With the combs hung, you turn your attention to the baskets. The basket of finished tops is full, the coils of combed wool lying in a soft, pale heap that rises slightly above the wicker rim, and you lift it carefully with both hands, feeling the satisfying weight of it, the weight of an evening's work made tangible. You carry it to the table, which you have cleared and wiped clean, and you set it down in the center where the candlelight falls directly upon it. The tops glow in the golden light, their smooth, even surfaces catching the glow and reflecting it back in a soft, diffuse radiance. And you take a moment to look at them, to admire the quiet beauty of the ordered wool. Each coil is a small, perfect thing, a continuous ribbon of parallel fibres that holds within it the memory of the field, the washing, the teasing, the combing, and the patient hands that guided it through every stage. You reach into the basket and lift one of the tops, a long, smooth rope of wool that drapes over your palm like a length of pale silk, and you hold it close to the candle flame, examining it one final time. The fibres lie straight and even, their crimp still faintly visible, but now stretched into a gentle, regular wave, and the color is a warm, soft cream, the color of fresh milk or the inner heart of a winter apple. There are no tangles, no short fibres poking out at odd angles, no specks of chaff or seed. The wool is as clean and ordered as it can possibly be, ready for the spinner's wheel or the dyer's vat, ready to become yarn, cloth, a garment, a blanket, something that will warm someone through a cold night. You coil the top again and lay it gently back in the basket, and then you cover the basket with a clean linen cloth, tucking the edges down loosely to keep the dust off. The wool will wait here, patient and unchanged, until it is needed. Now you turn to the other basket, the one that held the teased wool and is now empty, only a few fine stray fibres clinging to the wicker sides. You take it to the door and step outside into the cool, damp night, where the air is still and heavy with the scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. You turn the basket upside down and shake it gently, and the few remaining fibres drift away into the darkness like tiny ghosts, catching the faint light from the doorway before vanishing. The night is profoundly quiet. No wind, no bird, no distant animal, only the deep, enveloping silence of the countryside asleep. You stand for a moment in the doorway, breathing in the cold, clean air, feeling it clear the warmth of the cottage from your lungs, and then you step back inside and close the door, dropping the latch into place with a soft, final click. The empty basket goes back to its place against the wall, and then you attend to the other tools and vessels that have served you through the long process. The wooden teasing board you wipe down with a dry cloth, removing the faint dust of wool fibres that has settled on its surface, and you lean it against the wall beside the baskets where it will wait for the next fleece. The hurdle, which has been leaning against the wall since the wool dried, you inspect briefly, picking off a few stray fibres that have caught on the withies, and then you stack it neatly in the corner with the stools that held it. The oak tub, still smelling faintly of wet wool, you tip onto its side so that the last traces of moisture can drain away, and you leave it propped against the wall to dry completely overnight. The shallow tin pan that caught the drips you wipe dry and hang on its hook beside the hearth. Every tool, every vessel, every surface is cleaned and put away, the cottage returning to its natural state of quiet order. The small pile of waste wool that accumulated during the combing, the short fibres and the tiny tangles that could not be drawn into the tops, you gather from the block and from the floor around the stool, collecting every last wisp. This wool is too short for combing but too good to throw away, and so you place it in a small linen bag that hangs from a peg near the fire, a bag that holds other such remnants for future use, perhaps for stuffing a pillow or felting into a small dense cloth. You tuck the wool into the bag and draw the string tight, and then you brush your hands together, feeling the last of the fibres fall away. The hearth draws your attention now because the fire has burned very low and must be tended for the night. You take the iron poker and gently stir the coals, bringing a fresh glow to the surface, and then you add one final log, a thick, slow-burning piece of oak that will smoulder through the remaining hours of darkness and keep the chill from the room. You arrange the coals around it with care, banking them so that the log will catch slowly and the fire responds with a soft, contented sigh, the flames licking up around the bark in thin, blue-orange ribbons. You stand before the hearth for a moment, warming your hands front and back, feeling the heat seep into your fingers, which are still slightly stiff from the long hours of combing. The candles are the last thing to attend to. The one on the block has burned down to a stub, its flame guttering in a pool of melted tallow, and you pinch it out between your fingers, a small quick motion that leaves a thin trail of smoke curling upward. The candle on the mantelpiece still has some life in it, but you extinguish it as well, because the night is done and the work is complete. The room falls into the softer, redder light of the fire alone, the corners deepening into shadow, the beams overhead receding into a warm, velvety darkness. The only sound now is the low, steady hum of the flames and the occasional soft tick of cooling stone. You stretch your fingers slowly, spreading them wide and then curling them into loose fists, feeling the pleasant, mild ache of well-used hands. Then you walk to the table and stand beside it, looking down at the covered basket of wool tops that sits in the center like a quiet monument to the day. The basket represents the whole journey of the fleece, from the moment you carried the rolled bundle through the door to this final moment of peaceful completion. You think of the sorting by candlelight, the steeping in the warm water, the gentle washing, the spreading on the hurdle, the patient teasing, the slow rhythmic combing. Each step was small and careful, and each step has led to this, a basket of smooth, ordered wool ready for whatever comes next. You lift a corner of the linen cloth and look at the tops one more time, their pale coils gleaming softly in the firelight, and then you tuck the cloth back down and leave them to their rest. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to prepare, nothing more to clean. The cottage is in order, the tools are in their places, the fire is burning steadily, and the wool is at peace. You stretch your arms slowly above your head, feeling the pull in your shoulders and the long muscles of your back, and then you let them fall to your sides, heavy and relaxed. You draw the stool close to the hearth one final time and sit down, not to work, but simply to be. The fire has settled into a deep, quiet glow, the oak log now fully caught and burning with a slow, steady flame that casts a warm golden light across the stone flags. Your shadow stretches out behind you, large and soft and motionless, and the walls of the cottage seem to breathe around you, expanding and contracting with the pulse of the fire. The scent of the room is peaceful and complete. The clean wool in its basket, the faint tang of the extinguished candles, the deep, woody smell of the burning oak, and underneath it, all the ever-present, faint sweetness of dried rushes and old stone. You sit for a long while, letting the quiet of the night wash over you, letting the warmth of the fire seep into your bones. Your mind is calm and empty, free of thoughts and plans, resting in the present moment as lightly as a leaf on still water. The day has been long and quiet and complete, filled with small patient tasks that have added up to something whole, something finished, something good. The fleece has been prepared, the combs have been cleaned, the fire has been banked, and now there is nothing left but to sit and to breathe and to let the peace of the cottage settle into you like the fibres settling into the basket, layer upon soft layer. Outside, the night is deep and dark and silent, the world wrapped in its own quiet dreams, and inside, the cottage holds its warmth close, a small safe sphere of light and peace. You know that the wool will be there in the morning just as you left it, patient and unchanged, and that knowledge is a quiet comfort, a steady, grounding presence. You sit until your eyelids grow heavy and the fire has burned down to a low ruby pulse, and then you rise slowly, bank the coals one last time, and make your way to your bed in the corner, where the blanket of wool waits to wrap you in its own soft, ordered warmth, a final gift of the fleece that has been your quiet companion through the long, slow, peaceful evening.